What's up, everybody? We are doing another breakdown for some of the music from Horizons of Achaea. This time, it's going to be Valen's theme. He's sort of like an astute, very disciplined, so it's very boisterous. It's very, but heavy at the same time. It kind of feels like Eastern European classical music, if I'm being completely honest. We're just going to listen to it. We're going to listen to it from the top, and then we're going to do a little bit of a breakdown. Here we go. All right, and then it loops. Okay, so this track, number one, was a ton of fun to make. In all of my music studies, Shostakovich was one of my big-time inspirations, Rachmaninoff as well, sort of the Eastern European composers of the early 20th century. Big influence of mine. So this felt right at home. The pa 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 da da, that type of thing at the very beginning is deceivingly not just that. All right, so what do I mean by that? So you would think, if we look at the very beginning here, in the score, you've got like a 1, 2, 3, dun, da, da, bum, bum, right? However, what's also happening is some faster stuff in the clarinets. Chicka, 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 baka, baka, right? So this does two things. It adds density, right? So rather than it just being like strings and horns, it also gets that kind of thick, warm clarinet texture in there as well. And it adds forward motion. Rather than 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you know, it kind of goes, da, 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 ba, 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 ba. It kind of just gives it that forward drive behind it. And when you're dealing with things like airships in this game, you kind of want forward momentum, right? So let's just take a look at that. I'm going to just show you this. Right, so I'm leaving out that kind of big pa pa, but let's bring the low notes back in. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take away the clarinets. Take the clarinets away. And that texture is literally clarinets, horns playing the same notes, and violins. So when we bring the clarinets back in, let's bring them back in. Clarinet 1, clarinet 2. Hear how that, you can almost hear, you can hear the tail end. You can hear that kind of happening. But then underneath the melodious, is that a word? I think it's a word. Melodious strings, it's more subtle than it is in your face. Again, I'm going to play that same thing, but we're going to take those clarinets away. Sorry I'm hammering this in, but it's just one of those little orchestration things that it goes a very long way. Very subtle, but notice how it's much less kind of forward pushing. Same thing, bringing the clarinets back in. Just adds a little bit of a lilt to it. Lilt, melodious. Words of the day, I guess. And as I talked about in the airship theme, I am a big fan of counter melodies. So there's a basically trombone ensemble. So all three, technically speaking, all three of the trombones kind of come in and do this counter melody here. I'm going to play the same thing. We're going to bring in the just the melodies here, just the melodies. And then it kind of has this tail end of the melody. I wanted it to feel like it's kind of singing, right? I wanted it to feel almost like kind of like what I just did, whereas almost feeling slightly strained on the higher end of that. So rather than give it to all the violins, like violin 1 and violin 2, which this is kind of sitting right in the middle of its register, like a nice kind of comfy spot. It's not really low and thick and guttural, nor is it really high and strained. However, if I put the same melody an octave below in the higher part of the cellos, what this will do is it will make those higher notes feel a little bit more strained, because the cello is a lower instrument. So when it plays higher, it has more of a strained kind of nasally quality to it. So check that out. I'm just going to solo violin 1 and cello there for a second. Right here. Especially here. Right? Especially that high note. Is if you're listening on headphones, the cellos kind of sit to the right. So they'll be in your kind of right ear. You'll hear that. Okay, so after we have just another big grandiose moment of the melody where I just kind of intensify the orchestration, I want to talk about the B section here. The B section, fun fact, was originally a different set of instruments playing it. I ended up opting for the clarinet, a solo clarinet, but if you look at the original score, you can see that it was originally a trumpet. And I did that, and I was like, oh, it just sounds too, it just didn't sound like there wasn't a warmth I was looking for, right? Because trumpets, they have a very distinct quality, trumpets. A clarinet kind of always has this warm, not hollow, but a warm, rounded quality to it. So I'm gonna play this B section here. Kind of have these pokey trumpets lead us into the next big moment. But that clarinet, it's such a lovely little texture. I love the clarinet. You know what's fun is when I'm actually like sort of mixing all of this. This is what it originally sounds like. This is I don't want to get too technical here, but you can kind of see the process. So if I take off all the reverb and all the stuff that's attached to it, it sounds like this. It's kind of like it's just sitting in a very small boxy room. So you bring in all the room and all the reverb and you get a nice kind of lush hall quality to it. This moment was so much fun to make. Because again, when you're thinking about a very strong, astute individual, you know, you want to keep the power and the momentum going. So having those little kind of B section, soft, tender moments are nice, but you want the power, right? So I did sort of this, what I guess you could call it like bell tones, right? This idea of a descending passage, bum, 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 right? There's sort of this descending scale that's happening, but it's interconnected in a way between the brass instruments. It just fills the texture out. It just fills it out. So if you can see here, so I've got like my two horns up here doubling with trumpet 2, the second trumpet. And there's sort of this descending figure, right? So when horn 1 and 2 land on this pitch, they sustain that over, but the descending bell passage kind of continues, going to the other 2 horns, the other trumpets, and so forth. So let me just show you in action here. So you get this kind of crunchy middle. You get a very crunchy, dissonant middle, but with the surrounding harmony, it doesn't sound bad. Right here. Oh yeah, right there. That's what they would call a minor second, right? It's the closest 2 notes can come together in the Western 12-tone system. Mix in everybody else there, and you have just a big old full lush chord. Yeah, and this little figure, I love this little moment. I needed something to sort of fill the space. If I were to mute all this, for example, so we get to the end of that chord, and then we just sort of let the little oompapas take their charge. It would just sound so abrupt, right? It would just feel like, oh, okay, suddenly there's an English horn solo. So I needed some sort of connective tissue. This is literally what it looks like. Dee-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Moving in thirds. So they're kind of moving in parallel. Violin 1 and violin 2. Yeah. It's kind of like you're sailing away, right? It's kind of like you're sailing away on a yacht or something of that nature. And here's another little moment of counter melody. So we have then the main theme, Valen's theme, comes back, this time played by an English horn, which is sort of the cousin to the oboe. It's just kind of a bigger, rounder sounding oboe. Can go lower than the oboe, so it's just a nice warm quality. But then we also have a little conversation between the English horn and violin 1 and violin 2, like so. You might be asking, what is that sound up top? Well, that is sort of that's actually, well, it is the flute coming up, a solo flute coming up an octave above the English horn in the second half of the phrase, like so. Right? So just again, it adds brightness, it adds that variety, it adds that forward momentum. I talked a lot about with the airship theme in the previous breakdown video. That's really what music making is. It's like, okay, capturing the concept, capturing the idea. In this case, it's a character theme, but then just to keep things moving, just to keep the colors interesting without derailing from that core concept. So, well, there it is. There is Valen's theme from Horizons of Achaea. I hope you enjoyed this little breakdown of this theme and the orchestration, all the nitty-gritty details. Always a good time making stuff like this. So thank you so much for supporting the project. And as always, we'll see you on the horizon.